happening is kids are graduating into diplomas, but and before they even graduate, they're on track to graduate, but they don't realize when they start applying to these schools, you don't have the coursework. You don't have the courses. You don't have enough courses to make sure that you get into these schools. So,
Outlets.
parents, be mindful of your child's schedule and know there's a difference between a South Carolina diploma and then a college ready diploma. At least in South Carolina, there is. When I was growing up in school in the 1990s, you have what was called tech prep and you have what's called college prep. Now they took the tech prep out. But if you ever notice, some of you, you don't take all these classes that supposedly colleges will accept. Um, there's really a misnomer, and find out some more information about the Algebra 1 Part 1, Algebra 2 Part 2. So I used to teach Avid. I'm a former educator, 20 years in the classroom. Let me preface that. And I used to teach this course on Avid, which is a college and career preparedness course. And one of the things I would do with my rising eighth graders, and eventually I did it when I taught juniors, is we would look at what are your requirements to have not just a diploma so you can graduate, but to be college ready. Like what courses need to be on your schedule to ensure that you don't just walk out with a South Carolina diploma, but you're able to get into somebody's school. Also, one thing I would do with my eighth graders is we would sit and look at, preferably, I think it was like Westwood's curriculum, their curriculum guide and their course guide before they had to register for classes, and tell them these are the type of courses. Matter of fact, it was called backwards mapping. It was called backwards mapping. So we would look at, what do you want to be when you graduate from college? I'm not college. When you graduate from high school, what is your ultimate goal? Is it to go to college? And if it is, what do you want to study? Then based on that, we would backwards map, what are the courses I need to take to make sure that I am college ready. So, and we didn't just look at your English ones. That's another thing. When you see kids have a whole bunch of English seminars versus English 1 and English 2, no, no. So what we look at is not just your English ones, what type of sciences do you need to make sure you take? What type of social studies do you need to make sure you have to take? We looked at the fact that you have to take U.S. history your junior year, government and econ your senior year. But we will also look at, even though we would only look at Westwood schedules when my kids went everywhere, it was a guide for us to look at, well, what are some of the enrichments, the electives? They call them electives in high school, and enrichments in middle school. What are the electives that they offer that I can possibly apply to my future career? You can't tell me you want to have a career in computer science, but you're not taking extra, because you have to take one computer science class to graduate, but you're not taking the extra ones to get savvy in that area. Make it make sense. Don't tell me you want to be a journalist like I did. I wanted to be a journalism, so I took journalism 1 and I took journalism 2. Journalism 2 was our yearbook course where you were on the yearbook staff. I also took creative writing prior to taking those 2 courses. So again, think about what the end goal is and take as many courses to prepare for that. But you want to make sure you're in the right courses. I mentioned earlier versus the Algebra 1 versus the Algebra Part 1, Part 2. Now, I remember, I wouldn't say get into a scruffle, but I remember seeing that on one of my, she's a senior this year, schedule, and supposedly they changed it where it still counts as algebra. And I was like, but this was the counselor telling me this. So I'm hoping that they were right. It was the school counselor. But I would strongly recommend, make sure, like, you definitely should be, your incoming freshman should definitely have English 1, Algebra 1. Unless they already took Algebra 1 eighth grade year, which a lot of parents don't know. If your test scores are high enough, you can take English 1 and Algebra 1 and even geometry your eighth grade year. So that's why I remember my son, he took those. That's why he was ahead in his math credits. But again, be mindful of that. Be cognizant of their schedule. And what I loved about my relationship and Avid and the type of trust my kids built with me and we built with each other, it was to the point when they got their schedules, I had parents emailing me, calling me, can you look at this? Is this right? I even had kids, Mashinkis, is my schedule right? Should I have something? And once I would see things I didn't think was right, I would email all my parents, let them know, double check your kid's schedule, make sure they have A, B, C, D, because if they don't, you need to get them in those courses, and you need to, because sometimes they wouldn't allow them, which I thought was weird, to take English 1 if their score wasn't high enough. They would make them take reading seminar. Now, the way I think it should be, you can still take English 1, but you also have to take reading seminar. At the time when this is happening, it was like only reading seminar was offered. And I was like, nah, you need to ask your counselor to override you, sign the waiver to get you an English 1. I know I'm giving y'all